by Chasing the Rainbows with your host, Bernice Quisenberry.
This week's episode is 9 Months of Fear with Bree and B. Thank you so much for coming back, Bree.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. So this episode is about pregnancy after loss. Our intentions are not to trigger or scare anyone. We are just shedding light on these controversial topics that are avoided in our society for those that are living it right now and that are going through it so they aren't alone.
Yep.
So just wanted to put that out there. The acronym for FEAR for me has always stood for false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
And so, even though these things, we know after we go through a loss and we become loss survivors and we understand our network and we hear all these stories, it does, get us to kind of live in that fear when we're going through or blessed enough to be pregnant after our losses.
Yes, that was a huge thing for me. I know when we did finally get pregnant, we had 2 losses, stillbirths, and then we had 4 early miscarriages. And then we went through 5 years of infertility. And then so when we did finally become pregnant, fear really was at the center of my pregnancy. And looking back, of course, I regret that now, but it's true. You can't help it. It's something that you've had this traumatic experience that you've gone through, and fear just was at the center of that pregnancy, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And like I said, once you start to understand survivor stories, you hear those rare occurrences or, experiences that happen, the less than 1% and things like that. And you and I, we talked about it. It's how, it's normal.
Yeah.
It's okay because this is, part of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things too for me is the guilt of complaining about pregnancy after going through a loss, because it's like, I should just feel blessed that I even got pregnant or am pregnant, after what we just went through. However, it's normal to still have pregnancy symptoms and want to talk about it.
Yeah, I know. I struggled with that too. I remember feeling so ungrateful. I felt like I sounded ungrateful. Yes. I wasn't ungrateful, but I sounded ungrateful. So especially towards the end and stuff, when you're so uncomfortable and, in the beginning I was very sick, throwing up and, the whole 9 yards. And exhaustion. Yes. I felt like I couldn't say anything because I felt like if I said something or complained, I was being ungrateful, and people would look at me like, just be happy you're pregnant. Like, isn't this what you wanted? But those symptoms were so hard to deal with and challenging and really affected my everyday life that I think I internalized a lot of it because I didn't want to sound ungrateful.
Right. And I, tried to look at each pregnancy as it was, right? Like, this pregnancy is different. This one is different. But when you're living it and your hormones are raging and all that you're going through already, and you're still, grieving a lifetime without your other baby because they are different.
Yeah.
It's hard not to.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I agree. Did you ever, for me personally, did you ever build up a wall? When you were pregnant, did you ever make those connections with the baby? How did that go as far as that is concerned?
Absolutely. So it's interesting that you say this, and we've had conversations of this, in our support groups and things like that. So for me, I had a really hard time bonding and connecting with our baby after the loss of Brooke. And it was because I was so fearful something was going to happen, and then I would be connected, and then I would be down a horrible path, worse than where I was, because then, you have that other one. So it is hard. I feel like, did you too?
Oh man, I still, so my rainbow baby is going into kindergarten. And I still have a lot of guilt because it's probably one of my biggest regrets is through the whole pregnancy with her, we had just had 6 losses, right? So I built this wall so high, this emotional wall to protect myself, because even my daughter at the time, who was 8, do you know what she said to me? She said, when I was pregnant with our rainbow baby, she said, "Mommy, when's this baby gonna die?" Because to her, that's what happened. Mommy got pregnant, baby dies. Like this was like to her, that was,
correlated it.
yeah, it was normal. So
Yeah.
I built this wall up so high, and I have this like horrible regret because I never bonded with her when she was inside of me. I would feel her kick. Like I remember with my first daughter before, because I had secondary infertility. So
Right.
my first pregnancy went smooth sailing, nothing,
Yes.
and I would play music for her and I like
Right.
would, feel her move around and enjoy that.
And all the joy and happiness with pregnancy that
Yes.
you were experiencing.
I had none of that with my other daughter. I just like, and I felt so guilty about it because, and then when she came out, I had this horrible fear that I would not feel close to her or connected. So when she was finally born, like would I feel like would I have those maternal instincts because
Right.
I didn't connect, like I had such a distant relationship with her, and thankfully the moment she came out, it was like nothing ever happened and it was instant connection.
Instantaneous.
But I really, like, looking back, I really struggle with that. And I really have a lot of regret that I built that wall up really high.
But what's interesting is I think it's also like our brains doing it to protect
Yeah,
ourselves because of
absolutely.
the emotional traumas that we just went through.
Yes. And,
right?
I think, and that's the thing, I regret it and I have guilt about it, but I don't
Right.
think it would have been any different
Right.
because I couldn't help
Right.
it after everything we had went through.
Well, absolutely. And then also too, like that obsession then too, when you're pregnant. So like I would do all of these like deep dives of researching about every little thing. And I wouldn't even allow myself to run. And I'm a runner. And I run long distances, but even doing just a mile or two to 3 times a week, I wouldn't even do that with our rainbow baby because I was so fearful that my running was going to cause
You
something.
didn't want to do anything to
Right.
jeopardize. Yeah.
Right.
I get that.
So it's like, then that even fuels my anxiety even more because that's my form of meditation
Yes.
is being one with nature,
Right.
being out there,
Yes.
so it is all that.
Yeah.
But
Did you do a lot of like during your pregnancy, like stuff to reassure yourself? Like what kind of stuff did you do with that?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So, how I started to finally connect with our rainbow baby. It was probably into our second trimester. For me, I was told not to get a hand Doppler by our medical professionals.
Why
they
not?
said because you'll obsess, right?
yep.
However, for me, I was actually obsessing more about the not knowing than the knowing. So I would use the hand Doppler once or twice a day, maybe. Sometimes not, especially, and we'll get into the kick counts and things like that if I felt her moving a lot and things. But for me, it was hearing it. And also for our son, because for him to hear his sister and to know like she's doing okay, she's in there, she's moving, and to hear her heart, like it really helped him too a lot with the healing as
Yeah,
well.
no, that's great. I totally
But
get that.
you,
I was
right?
the opposite.
Right.
I actually did not want anything to do with a Doppler because I knew myself and I knew that I would become so obsessive
Yeah.
and it would not be good for me mentally. Like I think it would give me reassurance in the moment, but I would just continue to want to do it over and over and over,
Yeah.
and it would become a problem.
And would consume your whole
Yeah,
entire
it
pregnancy.
totally would. So for me, it was better to just not go there.
Well, and I think that's great to share because everybody is so different with handling loss, handling pregnancy after loss, and what that kind of looks like.
Yeah.
But then also for me too, the kick counts. So when we got to and just to like give a little bit of a background history, I didn't realize the importance of a hospital's national rankings and their NICU ranking, their level, until we went through our loss. And for me, we did research then because we were like, we need to go to a top hospital.
Yeah.
And it shows like them against like the standard of care, their capabilities, how they do their procedure, all that stuff. So it all fuels that number, right?
Well, that makes sense for you because Brooke was in the NICU for all
Right.
for all that time, and you saw the importance of having a NICU that can handle situations like that.
Right. So she was in a level 3 NICU, which means that they were not able to do surgeries on site.
Okay.
So when that happened, and we never thought to look at it, one, we were in COVID and hospitals weren't doing any tours and things like that. And with our son, completely happy with the hospital that we were at and things. So we just went back there anyways.
Yeah.
But then when you know, Brooke was crashing and everything, and thinking about like a surgery could have, you know, saved her life, all of those things. We went in there with a whole new lens.
Yeah.
You do. Like, you educate yourself so you can advocate better for yourself. You can advocate better for your baby, because like in the midst of the moment, I didn't know any of these things.
Yeah.
I couldn't hear anything. I didn't know what it was, because it was a whirlwind, those 5.5 weeks with her, and just all the events, right?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Educate yourself so you can advocate for yourself and your baby, because it's so true. You don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
And you know, so it's hard not to feel guilty about that.
Yes.
Why does it always come back to guilt?
I
feel like it
know,
always comes back to
know.
guilt. But it's hard not to feel guilty about it. But, you know, unfortunately, you've gone through this terrible experience losing Brooke, and now, you know, you did your homework,
Right.
and you educated yourself. So now you can advocate, and you can make sure that everything is set up as best as you possibly can, to the
In
best
my
of your
control.
ability, within your
Yes.
control,
Right.
to ensure that the next baby has the best care possible.
Absolutely. And you know, doctors aren't God. They aren't higher powers.
Right.
But when you look at the hospital system as a whole, it says about the capabilities of the hospital, right?
Exactly.
So that for us was really important. And also, what's interesting is I contracted COVID twice with our rainbow baby. Didn't have it the whole entire time during the pandemic, or with Brooke or anything like that.
Go figure.
And then we go into, right, 2021 and 2022, and then I get COVID twice. And what's interesting is being at, you know, Johns Hopkins, where we were, they looked at it and said, you know, let's treat its symptoms, right? We're going to look at this as a cold, and that's what it is. And then we're going to treat each symptom for what it is. And they did not make me feel crazy when I was talking to them about my fears, because you and I, you know, I heard about, you know, Fifth's disease and what happened with your occurrence, you know, and diseases crossing over. It's rare.
Yeah.
But then, you know, you do these deep dives on Google and researching all this stuff that all of a sudden then you think, oh my gosh, my baby can contract COVID.
And that is a slippery slope to go down.
Yes.
Dr. Google.
Yes,
is
I know, all of a sudden.
Not the best idea in the world, which I'm totally guilty of. But it's not, because
Right.
you open up a can of worms, and
know.
you're going to see anything
know.
and everything. And all of a sudden, you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to happen to me. And you can't stop thinking about it. And then you obsess about it. And then you fear it, and you know, it's false evidence appearing real.
Absolutely.
It's false. It's not
Absolutely.
happening to you, but now it's planted in your head. So you've got, you know, it's stressful enough to have a pregnancy after loss.
Absolutely.
And the fear that comes with that. And then throw in like all the things Dr. Google is telling you is going to go wrong.
Right.
And, you know, it becomes a slippery slope to go down.
Well, it does. And then also, before we even got to, you know, our hospital that we ended up delivering her at, I went in early, my first doctor's appointment for Faye, and we went into, you know, the doctor that we were also seeing with Brooke, and their take on it was, you know, oh my goodness, this is going to hurt your baby. So when I hear those kind of things, like, look, they wanted one less thing, you know, to be stacked against us.
Yeah.
And then you hear this and you're like, oh my gosh, now I hurt my baby. Now I killed my baby.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, then you go down all of those feelings again. And it's very, and granted, like, that's just what I heard. But when you're going down those slippery slopes, and then all of a sudden you start Googling things, but then that's why it's so important to go to a hospital who understands, you know, anxiety.
Who's going to be patient with you and
Yes.
understand. I know that was so important for me. So having a great care team that understood with pregnancy after loss, and
Right.
and helped not just my physical health, but my mental health as well. And I think that's just as important when you're
is.
going through this.
Well, it is. And then, like, things come up in pregnancy, right? Like, you know, like, for example, we dealt with constipation, right?
yeah.
And there was one point, because I was scared to take anything unless it was absolutely necessary, because
Yeah.
I was worried that it might hurt the baby,
Sure.
right? So I'm like, I am not going to take a Dulcolax or, like, you know, or Miralax or whatever it is, you know, to help with a little bit of constipation. So I'm like, I'm just going to tough this out. And, like, when it comes, right?
Yep.
Well, you know, it wasn't coming. And then it got to the point that, like, I was trying to go to the bathroom, straining really hard, and then
impacted.
bleeding started happening and things like that. And my husband was with me. I started throwing up too, because I was pushing so
man.
hard. And so I ruptured, you know, things back there, but it wasn't, you know, my lady parts. So So, but it freaked me out.
Yeah,
to
I'm
the
sure.
point then we were on the phone with Hopkins and talking to them through it. And then I go in to get checked the next day because I was a panicked mess. Like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, now I just hurt my baby.
Yeah.
You know, I did this. But these kind of things, and I got reassurance. And that was the thing. I called each time, right? And towards my in my last trimester, I was calling 2 to 3 times a week because I had such anxiety because Brooke would have been a stillbirth if we didn't go in for that last ultrasound with her. So this was in my mind then.
Oh, yeah.
And so I then was calling them, and each time they said, we don't know what exactly happened. We will never have those answers or no. So we would feel better you coming in to get checked
Yep.
than you sitting at home and worrying about this.
Yeah.
Because it would make us all just feel better.
Well, and you're just going to increase your blood pressure because you're stressed out, and like,
Absolutely.
you know, how your mental affects your physical as well. So,
Absolutely. And then
yeah.
it did. It gave me, every time I did go in, I got that 24 hours of a sense of relief, which was wonderful because that is so important when you're going through all of this
Mm-hmm.
and thinking about it. But, you know, these things, though, it's nice to feel validated when you're going in and not feel like a crazy person
Yes.
because your hormones are raging and you're
Yes.
feeling like you are.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That
And
just-
no one talks about it.
No.
So
No.
you think that you're so alone and you're out there on that isolated island.
Yeah.
And you're not.
No.
And this is all normal. Like, you went through a loss that was traumatic. You're pregnant again. It's traumatic for
Yes.
you because you're reliving what
and
you
I
just
think,
went through.
and that's why I think it's so important too that we're talking about this, because, you know, people think, you know, pregnancy loss, and we're trying to, you know, get out there and talk about that. But I think even more rare than talking about pregnancy loss is talking about pregnancy after loss. And, you know, because I think people who haven't gone through it, I think they look at you once you get pregnant. They're like, oh, good, they're pregnant. It's all flowers and rainbows.
Yes.
And it's actually, to me, I really, really, really struggled during my pregnancy after loss. But I kept quiet because I'm like, you know, I feel like everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is so great. You're
for
pregnant.
everybody else.
Yes. And to me, I'm like screaming on the inside because I feel like I'm going to lose my mind because I just
Absolutely.
keep playing through situations. I keep playing through my past. I keep playing through, you know, all these things that are just driving me crazy. And it was the longest 9 months of my life. Like, it was really hard.
It was. And it is that constant living in fear
Yes.
the whole entire time. It just
Yep.
does not have a shut-off valve.
Nope.
And, you know,
Not until the moment they are delivered. And that was honestly like
yes,
the-
that sense of relief.
oh my gosh, I have
Well, it's not-
never
it's like so immense.
had that feeling in my life. Like, I was so, it's like, I kind of described it as I had the whole world on my shoulders for 9 months, and I felt so weighed down. And the moment I delivered her and she screamed and cried,
My gosh.
I
yes.
felt like I could have floated up
Yes.
into the sky. Like, I
Yes.
literally felt my shoulders lifted, like this sense of, oh my gosh, she's here. Like, she's safe.
Yes,
I
in
can,
my arms.
in my arms, and I will
Breathing,
never
healthy.
forget that moment.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
No, I agree with you 100%. And I don't know how you exactly feel about this either, but when we did get pregnant with our rainbow baby, we told our support systems immediately. It wasn't like we waited until the 12 weeks
Yeah.
because we needed them just in case something were to
Sure,
happen,
yeah.
because I would need that emotional support 100%.
So
And I don't know how you feel.
I did. So we did share. I think it was probably around 8 or 9 weeks with immediate, like, so like my brother
Right.
and his family, my parents. But so this is so. I don't know what you did, but like, I didn't want anyone to know I was pregnant. I didn't tell us, like, to the point where, and it was simply because I didn't want to, the more people that knew, the more people I would have to tell that we lost the baby. Like, that was the
Wow.
way I was thinking.
Yeah.
I thought if people knew, then I'm going to have to tell all those people that I lost the baby, because I was just kind of not assuming it was going to happen, but like, I just was so used to it happening, I think, which is terrible. It was to the point where I would be walking through the aisles of like Target, and if I saw somebody, I would dodge down another aisle so they wouldn't see me. When I was bigger,
Wow,
when I couldn't
yeah.
conceal my pregnancy anymore, I wore baggy shirts, and we even concealed it from our daughter until we were probably around 20 weeks or so, because I
Oh,
didn't want
yeah.
her to have the stress of, because I know I was stressed out about pregnancy.
And then that,
And then I didn't want to
consider her and,
yes.
and everything that was going on with
But
her as
I
well.
really, we never posted anything on social media. I dodged people when I saw them in public, and as best I could. And we finally, when she was born, we finally posted on social media, and everyone was like, I didn't even know you were pregnant. I'm like, good. That was the goal. Like, I
Right.
really, and it was all a protective.
self-preservation.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, I mean, it does make sense,
Yeah.
especially with everything, because like you're already trying to deal with enough with yourself, with your husband, and
I didn't
your
even want a
daughter.
baby shower.
Yeah.
I remember really struggling when they wanted to throw me a baby shower, and because it had been 8 years since I had my firstborn, so
yes.
everything's outdated, and you
Oh,
know
right,
you need all this stuff.
right.
But I didn't even really want it. I mean, I did, but I didn't. I did because I knew we needed it, and I wanted to celebrate the baby. But in the same breath, I didn't want to, because all the stuff would come into my house, and then the baby would die, and what was I going to do with it? Like, we didn't even put the crib together until a week before. We didn't do anything. The room was not ready because I didn't want to do it in fear that something would happen, and then I'd have to look in that room. Like, it was hard. Like, I really had myself convinced that something was going to happen. And when I say I built emotional walls up, like, I really built emotional walls up. Like, I didn't do anything to prepare for this baby, because in my mind, something was going to happen, and I did not want to.
Be reminded.
Yes.
And you know, it's really interesting that you said that. So 2 days before Brooke passed, we had her baby shower.
Wow.
And my sisters and mom threw it. And it was solely because, same thing. Bryson
Yeah.
was, 8 years, that 8 years difference and things like that. But also, like, we were planning on her coming home from the NICU soon. So it just worked out perfectly. It was on my husband's birthday. It was like a whole thing. And so, I assumed we were going out to breakfast for that reason. And then, heading home after that. And then I was going to go into the NICU to spend time with her. All of a sudden, then people started showing up with gifts and things like that. So then 2 days later, she passes. Well, we had all the gifts in the family room. We had everything. And then we moved it all to her bedroom. It took me months to go into that room.
I'm
and
sure.
Even when we got pregnant with our rainbow baby, it took me up until Brooke's birthday, so we decided to celebrate that way. And that was through working through it and things like that, that I would finally step into that room, and we would turn the room into and paint it and turn it into her sister's room.
Yeah.
And for me, it was more important to celebrate her birthday than her death day.
Yeah.
So we did it on February 6th, and that was a month before, Faye came. And that was finally when I went through all the stuff from the baby shower, got it out of all the bags, like looked at it all. But all of that was so difficult. I mean, I kept her door closed. I could not open it. Couldn't even let the light in.
Yeah.
Like, I just did not. I could not. It just at all.
I get it.
At
Totally
all.
understandable. And that's exactly why I,
Right.
struggled with the idea of having a baby shower
Right.
and all that. And so,
It makes sense.
if anybody out there is going through that right now, like, and you're feeling that way, don't feel guilty about it, because it's a
Yes.
defense mechanism.
Yes.
It really is. And I feel bad about it now. Looking back, I feel guilty. I should have, bonded.
woulda,
I
couldas.
should have. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
But I know what I was doing, and I was.
And at that time, it felt right with
It was
what
right.
you were doing.
I was trying to protect myself.
Yes, it was.
That's
It
all
was
I
your
was
body
doing.
holistically trying to protect itself. That's
Exactly.
really what it feels like.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And so to go back to kick counts, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I know we were like discussing. I love the rabbit holes that we're going down to discuss.
We
these
tend to
things
do that, don't we?
Right. Well, and I think it's really important for listeners, because these are all things that we want to discuss on here.
Yeah.
So they feel it.
Real life stuff.
Right. So I was educated then what kick counts are. Never would have known what they were before, never heard of them before, anything like that, until our rainbow baby. And what was interesting was when I would make my phone calls into the hospital or my doctor's office and talk to them about what was going on, they would always ask me to do kick counts. So, to count 10 kicks, I believe it was 10 every hour. And so I then, if like an hour or two went by, because, I was working and I was in a meeting and wasn't paying attention to it, they always told me, just drink a little bit of juice or like eat something sweet, like some fruit. And then, let's see what happens, right? But the juice was the one that was going to be the instantaneous thing.
Right.
And so then I would do it, and it would give me that peace of mind.
Yeah.
I would get a little obsessive with it sometimes, where I would set alarms when my anxiety was really out of control. But I mean, that was something that I never learned or knew what it was.
Yeah.
But it did. It gave me that extra
The
little bit.
reassurance.
Yeah. And I feel like that was so important.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You got to find what works for you. So, like for you, the Doppler, the kick counts, those things worked for you.
Right.
And that may not work for everybody. Like the Doppler was a no-go for me just because I knew myself well enough to know that it would
Yes.
become a problem. But you you just got to do those little things, and finding a provider that can be really respect your feelings
Yes.
and understand what you've gone through to give you those reassurances when you need them.
Yes.
I think is very important.
It is. It is very important. And it goes back to their table side, bedside manner and what that all looks like and feeling comfortable and confident. I also had a hard time. I did one time walk back in to the hospital that, Brooke passed away in. That was the first time since leaving her with a nurse, rocking her, when she was dead,
Yeah.
And singing her, "You Are My Sunshine."
Yeah.
And as I walked out of the hospital that day, like that is so triggering, anything with
Yeah.
it. I did. I walked in one time and just being in there and I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't be here.
Yeah.
It was just a constant reminder, the whole entire thing.
Yeah, that's interesting you talk about that too, because that's something I did as well. So we had all of our losses, I decided when I was pregnant with my rainbow baby, Claire, I received fantastic care. I mean, there was nothing wrong in that sense. It was literally, I just could not walk through those doors anymore because there's so many memories there and none of them were positive.
Right.
Again, nothing with the experiences of the hospital physicians, anything like that. But it was simply like, it was just triggering to me.
Yes.
So I ended up switching my care because I just, for my mental health, could not, the memories. Like I remember so when I lost Landon, when I ended up being pregnant with Emma, who we also ended up losing eventually, but I remember going into I was in the same room where I found out I lost Landon. And yeah.
Oh, no.
And
Brie.
I didn't find out that day I had lost her. It was a couple weeks later, but like I still, it's on your mind constantly. So I just knew I needed a fresh start.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And I would think any provider out there would be understanding, that it's not you, it's me,
Right,
like
yes.
the typical,
to break
but in
up
this
here.
case it
Yes.
is like, it is me.
Yes.
And it's something that I needed to do for peace of mind and like kind of a fresh start.
Right. And I think too, for me, it was switching providers as
Yeah.
well, because you are reminded, not that they weren't caring providers, not that,
Right.
And things that I hear or experience during the loss and things like that might not have been full reality. It's just like how I remember it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
But it's all around those anxieties and that
Yep.
fear and
Yep.
living in it, and those triggers. And that's the thing, like anything we can do to try to prevent anything further, or the stress or anxiety
Yeah.
that we're already going through from all of this,
Yeah.
is just so important
And
for our
that's
own mental health.
and I totally agree. And I think that's the whole, like I was saying, the kick count or the Doppler or switching providers or whatever you got to do to give yourself some kind of peace as you navigate pregnancy after loss. Do it, because it's really, again, you take care of your physical health, but take care of your mental health as well.
Absolutely. And, the whole thing being too, I think what was really important to me was having other survivors to talk to about it, because that did deal with pregnancy after loss as well, because they understood exactly where I was and my feelings. Oh my gosh, were justified, and they would then share what they went through, and it all just made complete sense then. And I was like, wow, people actually understand and get me. And always being told, I felt like I didn't have someone to talk to, or I didn't, I could never really talk about it, because I kept turning to my husband and talking to him about it, which is great. But we both grieve differently and we both experience things differently.
Yep.
So I didn't want to steal his joy of us being pregnant,
Right.
when I was the one going through it.
Well, and it's hard because it is different,
Right.
And just having somebody to let you know you're not crazy.
Yes.
Because even just talking to you now, like some things you said I didn't know in your story, that like we've known each other a long time, but like I haven't heard some of these things, and it's interesting because I'm like, oh my gosh, same here. Like that happened to me, and that's how I felt too. And just having somebody validate those feelings, and you're not crazy.
Right.
You're building an emotional wall. Yep, I did the same thing. You switched providers because you couldn't stand to walk through those doors again. Yep, I did the same thing. And that's, and just talking it through with somebody who is going through the same thing as you is so important.
Absolutely.
It's life-changing.
And it goes back to like, and I just, we'll wrap it up with this, right? With intentions and looking at people's intentions, because when we first, lost Brooke, everybody was asking, and I think everybody was looking for that silver lining. There's never going to be a silver lining from losing our babies, right?
Yeah.
We're never going to find the positive in it because we do want our babies back, right? But they would always say, well, are you guys going to try again? Or when are you going to try again? Or are you going to get pregnant again? And it's like, that should not be in the same breath asking me how I'm doing when I lost my other baby, period, or how like you're processing that. Those conversations, I get it. Their intentions are pure. They're trying to like be our cheerleaders and things like that. But in the end, that's so insensitive.
Yeah.
Because what if I didn't want to because of the pain?
Or
that
what
we
if you
experienced?
physically couldn't?
Or what if we physically couldn't?
What if there was like
right.
damage done and there's nothing, you
And
can't
that
have
happens a
children?
lot.
Yeah,
Yes.
it does.
And that's exactly right too. It's all of those things.
Yeah.
And looking at it as a whole. And people just don't think about it. And that's why it's also important to have the Survivor Network when people are, approaching you at all angles with different stupidities that they don't even know it's stupid. You know, and I'm not trying to call people that. It's just in that moment and wanting to find the positive in things.
Well, and I think having, your network of people also be involved in the conversation so that they can educate themselves of what to say and what not to say. And I think, we'll look into having a podcast about the do's and the don'ts sometime, because I think that's important to talk about as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, just educating on what you should and shouldn't
And we
say.
do that now. If survivors out there listening right now, you have family members who are like, how can we help you? How can we get, we tell them to write in on our chasingtherainbows.org website, and they can write in and ask us, how can we support our survivor? Like the parents of the, couple that lost them, the siblings,
aunts, uncles,
aunts,
all
uncles,
that stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
And because we want to give them that resource and the knowledge, so then they can armor themselves to be the best that they can be, because you don't know until you know. And if you don't know, it's like, let us help you to help them.
Yep.
So then we can all come together and be this united network, because that's what it's all about, right?
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, all right, listeners, thank you so much for today. We will talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening.